My boyfriend said I wasn't feminine enough. He had no idea I'd find the camera. Mason told me I wasn't feminine enough the same night I got promoted. I'd been waiting 11 months for that promotion, managing 12 people without the title or the pay. When I finally got it, I came home with champagne and steaks. Mason was staring at water leaking under the sink. Perfect timing, he said. Something broke. I changed into jeans and fixed it in 10 minutes. When I stood up, he wasn't looking at me like I'd just solved a problem. He was looking at me like I'd proven one. You could have waited for me, he said. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh back. I told him about the promotion while washing my hands. He said congratulations, but there was this weird pause first. Then he asked how many men would report to me. 7 men and 5 women, I said. So you get to boss around 7 guys all day, then come home and fix the plumbing, he said. Sometimes I feel like I'm dating another man. That sentence came from someone who'd been eating the lunches I packed for 3 years. He didn't take it back. Instead, he started listing everything wrong with me. I wore sneakers too often. I didn't ask him to drive. I spoke too directly around his friends. I'd stopped wearing dresses, even though he left out the part where it was February in Ohio. Your promotion made it worse, he said. You don't let me feel like a man. I asked what being more feminine actually looked like. He said I knew. I told him I clearly didn't, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. He sighed like I was forcing him to explain something obvious. Put more effort into your appearance. Let me lead sometimes. Stop treating every problem like a challenge. I offered to help with the sink, he said. No, you said something broke. I corrected. This is what I mean, he snapped. You always have to win the wording. We didn't drink the champagne. The next day a package arrived at my office. Inside was a bright pink workout set, one size too small, with high maintenance printed across the chest in silver letters. Mason's gift message said, for the new, softer Claire. We're this Saturday. Trust me. Saturday was Derek's backyard cookout. Mason had already told everyone about my promotion in a group chat, followed by a joke about needing permission to stay out past 9 now that I was management. The pink top was designed to make me feel exposed. It was a test disguised as a gift. He wanted me to refuse so he could say I rejected every attempt he made. Or he wanted me to wear it and feel ashamed all afternoon. So I wore the whole thing. Leggings, crop top, hoop earrings, more makeup than I'd used in months. Mason stopped in the doorway while I was applying lipstick. You're really wearing that? He asked. You told me to, I said. I didn't think you'd wear the whole thing, he said. His face told me everything. He'd expected me to feel ashamed. At the cookout, the opposite happened. Marisol told me the color looked great. 2 women asked where I bought the leggings. One of Mason's friends said, management looks good on you. Then immediately looked terrified. Mason would think he was flirting. I laughed. Mason didn't. He kept standing between me and other people. Then he brought me his sweatshirt and said the temperature was dropping. It was 58 degrees, and everyone else was in short sleeves. When Marisol asked about the promotion, Mason interrupted to tell everyone I'd celebrated by fixing a sink because I couldn't let him do one thing around the apartment. Did you know how to fix it? Marisol asked him. That's not the point, he said. The conversation went quiet. Derek changed the subject. On the drive home, Mason asked why I'd spent so much time talking to his friends. They were at the party, I said. You know what I mean? He said. I did know. The outfit hadn't made me smaller. It had made people look at me, and he hadn't controlled what they saw. You enjoyed embarrassing me, he said. You selected the clothes and told me to wear them. I reminded him. You made it weird, he said. By fitting into it, I asked. He gripped the steering wheel and didn't speak for the rest of the drive. 3 days later, the workout set disappeared from the laundry. Mason said he hadn't seen it. I ordered another one in my actual size to see what he'd do. When it arrived, he left it unopened on the kitchen table. You bought it again? He asked. I liked the color, I said. Claire, people were staring at you. I thought you wanted me to be more feminine, I said. Not like that. He said there it was. He didn't want me to be feminine. He wanted me to perform a version that made him feel larger. The moment it gave me attention or confidence, it became the wrong kind. I thought if I showed him how unreasonable his rules were, he'd hear himself and stop. That was my first major mistake. The next morning, the bathroom cabinet hinge came loose. I found Mason on the couch and told him something needed fixing. He said he'd get to it. By Tuesday, the hinge had pulled out completely. I could fix it, I said, but I don't want to take away your chance to feel like a man. He stared at me, then spent 40 minutes forcing a stripped screw back into the same hole. I didn't correct him. When our internet bill showed an extra charge, I asked him to call because he wanted to handle problems. When we drove to dinner, I waited beside the passenger door until he unlocked it. When he asked where we should eat, I told him I trusted him to lead. He chose a restaurant with a 90-minute wait and blamed me for not making a reservation. I started taking longer to get ready and asked if my earrings matched. Mason lasted 4 days before complaining I'd become vain. At the grocery store, I handed him the heavy bags. He asked why I was acting helpless. I'm receiving help, I said. You said I needed to learn. He called me childish. The whole thing became funny to me. I'd spent 3 years doing most of the practical work while Mason described himself as the provider. For the first time, he had to live inside the rules he kept talking about. I told my sister Hannah what I was doing. She laughed so hard she had to put down the phone. Please tell me you made him call the cable company, she said. 46 minutes on hold, I said. You monster, she laughed. I was folding towels while we talked. Mason was supposedly at a client dinner in Dayton, more than an hour away. I told Hannah I wanted him to admit he didn't want a softer girlfriend. He wanted the same girlfriend doing all the same work while pretending he was in charge. So basically, you want him to say the quiet part out loud, Hannah said. Exactly, I said. I want him to admit this was never about me being feminine. Mason came home shortly after midnight. The next morning, he was making coffee when he said, "You should be careful what you ask people to say out loud." I looked at him. What? He poured coffee into his travel mug. You and Hannah, you think you're very smart. You want me to admit this was never about you being feminine. He used my exact words. For a second, I assumed Hannah had texted him, but that made no sense. Then Mason added, and she thinks I'm saying the quiet part out loud. Very original. That was Hannah's exact sentence. I felt the room change around me. Did Hannah call you? I asked. Why would your sister call me? He smiled without looking at me. Then how do you know what she said? Because I know you, Claire. You're predictable. You predicted the exact phrase, I said. He finally looked at me. Keep playing your little game, he said. Let's see how long you can keep it up. Then he kissed my forehead and held it there too long. It felt like a threat. I stood in the kitchen until I heard his car pull away. Hannah hadn't told him. No one had. That's when the story stopped being funny. I called Hannah from my car instead of the apartment. She swore she had never contacted Mason. I asked if anyone had been near her while we talked. She had been home alone. Maybe he saw your messages, she said. We had not discussed the joke by text. We had only talked on the phone. I checked my phone for apps I did not recognize. I changed my passcode. I looked at the devices signed into my email and removed an old tablet Mason sometimes used. Then I went to work and tried to act normal. At lunch, I told Denise I needed to check something on the apartment's network, but I did not want to use my own laptop. I expected her to ask questions. Instead, she led me to a spare computer in the training room and said, "Take your time." Denise had managed people for 20 years. She knew when not to make someone explain before they were ready. I signed into the Router account. Mason had created it when we moved in, but the bill was in both our names. I had never looked at the device list before. There were the normal things: 2 phones, 2 laptops, the television, a printer, and the smart thermostat. There was also a device labeled charging block. It had been online during my call with Hannah. It had been online every night for the previous 3 months. I searched the model information attached to the device address. The results showed small wireless internet cameras hidden inside working wall chargers. They looked almost identical to the white block plugged into the outlet across from our bed. I closed the browser and sat there with my hands flat on the desk. Denise came in 10 minutes later. She did not ask what I found. She asked if I was safe going home. I told her I did not know. That evening, I acted tired. Mason watched basketball in the living room while I changed clothes in the bathroom. I left the suspected charger exactly where it was. The next morning, after he left, I unplugged it using a dish towel. It was heavier than a regular charger. A tiny dark circle sat inside the letter O in the printed logo. I took pictures of the front, back, model number, and serial number. I took screenshots of the router history. Then I plugged it back in at the same angle. I did not confront him. That surprised me. I had always been the person who wanted to talk immediately. If something was wrong, I believed you named it, discussed it, and fixed it. But a normal person did not hide a camera in a bedroom and then quote private conversations over coffee. I no longer knew what naming the problem would make him do. For the next week, I lived 2 different lives. In one, I was Mason's girlfriend. I went to work, came home, asked about his day, and apologized for taking the joke too far. I stopped the exaggerated feminine routine. I wore my normal clothes. I even told him he had made a fair point about letting people help me. He softened almost immediately. He brought home flowers. He fixed the bathroom cabinet correctly after watching a video. He made dinner twice and told me he missed us being a team. In my other life, I took notes. I used a paper notebook that stayed in a locked drawer at work. I wrote down the dates when he mentioned things I had said while alone. I listed every shared account, every device in the apartment, and every password he might know. I copied my pay stubs, tax forms, passport, birth certificate, and car title. The more ordinary the task looked, the more frightening it felt. I also began checking the parts of Mason's life I had never questioned. Mason said he was a regional sales director for a logistics software company called Northline Systems. He had business cards. He wore colored shirts to work. He took calls in the car and complained about quarterly numbers. Once every few months, he flew to Chicago for what he called leadership meetings. I had met 2 coworkers at a Christmas party during our first year together. At least, I thought they were coworkers. The company's website listed its leadership team, but Mason was not there. That did not prove anything. Most companies did not put every regional manager online. His LinkedIn page still showed the title. It had recommendations from people I recognized from his friend group. None of them worked for Northline. I called the main office from the spare phone in Denise's office and asked to be connected to Mason Reed. The receptionist put me on hold. When she came back, she said there was no employee by that name. I said he might be in regional sales. She checked again and said, "We had a contract representative named Mason Reed, but that contract ended last summer. 8 months earlier. Mason had left our apartment that morning in a pressed shirt, carrying the laptop bag I bought him for his birthday. I thanked the receptionist and hung up. That night, I asked Mason how work was. He loosened his tie and said his team had closed a large hospital account. He gave me the name of the hospital. He complained that one of his younger salespeople had almost ruined the deal by talking too much. He did not hesitate once. I watched him heat leftover pasta while describing a meeting that had never happened. He included small details. The conference room had been too cold. The client kept checking his watch. Mason had saved the presentation by changing the pricing structure at the last minute. Before that night, those details had made his stories believable. Now I understood that the details were the point. I told Hannah in person. We met at a coffee shop near my office and left our phones in her car. She looked more frightened by the fake job than the camera. "Where does he go every day?" she asked. I had no idea. "And how is he paying his half of the rent?" I did know that. Our rent came from a joint household account. We each transferred money into it. Or at least, I believed we did. The bank statements showed that Mason's regular transfers had stopped 5 months earlier. He made smaller deposits from different payment apps, usually a day or two before rent was due. Twice, money had been moved from our emergency savings into checking and then replaced after I was paid. The emergency savings account was supposed to contain almost $30,000. Mason handled the online access and sent me a screenshot every month because he said looking at the balance motivated him. I had never activated my separate login because I trusted him to manage it. The real account contained $4,218. Most of that was mine. When I looked closely, the screenshots he sent did not come from a bank app. They came from a spreadsheet designed to look like one. I felt embarrassed in a way that almost made me angry at Hannah for being there. I managed vendor contracts worth millions of dollars. I checked invoice numbers down to the last digit. At home, I had accepted screenshots from my boyfriend because asking to see the account directly felt distrustful. Hannah reached across the table and said, "He built this around the fact that you trusted him. That is not the same thing as you being stupid." I wanted to believe her. We decided I should speak to a lawyer before moving money or taking the camera. Denise gave me the name of Priya Shah, an attorney who had helped one of her relatives with a stalking case. Priya listened without interrupting. Then she asked practical questions. Was the apartment lease in both names? Yes. Did I have proof the charger belonged to Mason? Not yet. Had he threatened to hurt me? No. Did he control my access to transportation? No. My car was mine. Did he know where Hannah lived? Yes. Did he have access to my work schedule and location? Probably. Priya did not tell me to march into a police station and expect an immediate arrest. She explained that laws around recording could depend on where the device was placed, whether audio was captured, who lived in the home, and what could be proven about ownership. She told me not to remove or damage it yet. "Your first goal is not winning an argument," she said. "Your first goal is getting somewhere safe with the records you already have." That sentence changed how I thought about leaving. Until then, part of me still imagined confronting Mason with the camera, watching his face, and making him admit what he had done. Priya made me see that an admission was not the same as safety. The next discovery happened because Mason started talking about West Virginia. He had mentioned moving before. Columbus was getting expensive, he said. We could buy a larger place somewhere quieter. Since I worked with vendors in several states, he kept suggesting that I ask to become fully remote. I had always treated it as daydreaming. 2 days after my meeting with Priya, Mason showed me a listing for a house outside a town I had never heard of. It sat on 3 acres and cost less than our apartment building. The nearest grocery store was 25 minutes away. Imagine not dealing with traffic, he said. You could work from home. I could travel when I needed to. What about Hannah? She could visit. What about my office? You just got promoted. That gives you leverage. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. You would not need to be so hard all the time out there. I asked what that meant. He smiled and touched my hair. You could relax. Let me handle things. The following Saturday, Mason went to the gym. I opened the desk cabinet where we kept warranties, old lease documents, and tax papers. I was looking for a receipt connected to the charger. I did not find one. I found a folder with my name on it. The first page was a rental application for the house in West Virginia. Mason had entered my income, employer, social security number, and vehicle information. The application was unfinished, but everything needed to submit it was there. He listed himself as self-employed. Behind it were printouts of 3 more houses. All were in small towns. All were at least 2 hours from anyone we knew. Then I found a document titled Claire Incidents. It looked like a private record someone might keep for a doctor or attorney. Each entry had a date and a short description. One described the night of my promotion. According to Mason, I became angry after he offered to repair the sink and refused to celebrate with him. One described the pink workout set. It said I dressed provocatively to seek attention from his friends, then became hostile when he expressed concern. The missing first outfit was described as something I had thrown away during an emotional episode. My joke about letting him lead was recorded as sudden personality change and regression. There were references to audio files. He had turned every response to his behavior into evidence about mine. The last pages contained contact information for Hannah, my mother, Denise, our apartment manager, and the human resources department at my company. Next to Denise's name, Mason had written, "May be sympathetic. Approaches safety concern, not relationship conflict." I heard a car door outside. For 1 second, I froze with the folder open on my lap. Then I photographed every page, returned the papers in the same order, and closed the cabinet. I had just reached the kitchen when Mason opened the front door. He was carrying 2 smoothies. "You look pale," he said. I told him I had stood up too fast. He handed me a smoothie and studied my face. "You know you can tell me if something is wrong." I took the cup because refusing it would have looked strange. "I know." He smiled. "I only want to help you." I drank the smoothie while the camera across from our bedroom remained connected to the network. That afternoon, I understood the entire shape of the plan. Mason had not suddenly become controlling because I got promoted. The promotion had created a problem for him. I now earned enough to leave, and my job tied me to people he could not manage. The argument about femininity gave him a way to make independence sound like a personal defect. The workout set gave him a reaction he could record. The remote house would separate me from my office and my sister. The incident file would explain any future resistance as instability. He was not asking me to become softer. He was building a version of me that other people would not believe. I called Priya from the parking garage at work. She told me to leave as soon as I could do it safely. Hannah wanted me out that night. I wanted the same thing, but leaving was more complicated than walking through the door. Mason knew where Hannah lived. He had access to the apartment's smart lock. He could see my car through the parking lot camera. He knew my work hours and every part I normally used. We made a plan that looked boring, because boring was less likely to be noticed. I told Mason our company was conducting a payroll audit and needed updated identity documents. That gave me a reason to take my passport, birth certificate, social security card, and car title to work. Denise locked them in her office. I began carrying a large gym bag again. The first time it held gym clothes. The second time it held medication and 2 work outfits. The third time it held my grandmother's jewelry and the external drive with my personal photos. I opened a checking account at a different bank using the office address for mail. I changed the direct deposit for half my paycheck, then the other half after confirming it worked. I did not drain the joint account. Priya told me to document the balance and take only money I could clearly show was mine. Denise quietly changed the emergency contact on my employee file from Mason to Hannah. She also told the receptionist not to confirm whether I was in the building if anyone called asking for me. Every night, I went home and behaved normally. That was the hardest part. Mason became kinder as I became more frightened. He cooked breakfast. He sent affectionate messages. He said he was proud of my promotion. He suggested we take a weekend trip to look at houses, but he presented it as a romantic surprise rather than a plan. Once, he stood behind me while I washed dishes and said, "This is all I wanted," as being peaceful. I realized peace, to him, meant he had no evidence that I was resisting. We chose his Thursday poker night for the move. He played at Derek's house every week from 7 until at least 11. Hannah rented a small storage unit under her name. 2 of her friends agreed to help. I was not taking furniture. I was not taking dishes, decorations, or the television I had paid for. We planned to remove clothes, work equipment, documents, and a few boxes of personal items. At 6:40 p.m. that Thursday, Mason kissed me goodbye. "Don't stay up," he said. I told him I would probably take a bath and go to bed early. At 6:52 p.m., Hannah's car pulled into the rear lot. Her friends parked on the next street and walked over carrying empty laundry baskets so they would look like neighbors. We moved fast. I had already packed most things inside ordinary storage bins. One friend carried them down the back stairs. Hannah photographed each room before we touched anything. I took my tool bag from the closet, then put it back. I do not know why. Maybe it still felt like taking the final piece would make the move real. Hannah saw me hesitate, picked up the bag, and handed it to me. "It's yours," she said. At 7:31 p.m., the smart lock sent a warning tone from Mason's tablet. The bedroom camera had gone offline because Hannah's friend unplugged the router while moving the desk. My phone rang 15 seconds later. Mason, I did not answer. He called again. At 7:34 p.m., I received a message. "Why is the apartment offline?" Then another. "Claire, answer me now." Derek's house was 12 minutes away. We left the last 2 boxes. I locked the apartment with the physical key and got into Hannah's car. One friend drove my car. We pulled out at 7:39 p.m. Mason entered the front lot as we turned onto the main road. I saw his car in the side mirror. He stopped across both parking spaces and left the driver's door open. My phone kept ringing. Hannah asked if he was following us. For the next 3 blocks, he was. Then the traffic light changed between our cars. Hannah turned right, drove toward a police station we had already marked on the route, and called 911 through the car system. She said we were being followed by my former partner after I moved out of a shared apartment. We did not claim he had a weapon. We did not claim he had threatened us. She described his car and gave our location. Mason turned away before we reached the station. At 7:56 p.m., he sent one final message from his regular number. "You are proving everything I told people about you." Then he stopped calling. For 20 minutes, I thought that meant he had accepted it. I should have known better. At 8:18 p.m., my mother called Hannah. She was crying. Mason had told her I was having some kind of breakdown. He said I had left the apartment in the middle of an episode, taken important documents, and disappeared with people he did not recognize. He sent her a recording of me crying. The recording was real. It came from a night 6 months earlier when my father had been admitted to the hospital with chest pain. Mason removed every reference to my father and kept the part where I said, I could not think clearly and wanted to run away from everything. My mother asked if I was safe. I said yes. Then she asked if I was sure. That hurt more than I expected. It also showed me how effective Mason's file could be. My mother knew me better than almost anyone, and after one call from him, she was listening for something unstable in my voice. I told her I could not explain everything that night. I asked her not to give Mason any information about where I was staying. She agreed, but she sounded uncertain. At 8:42 p.m., an officer called me. Mason had requested a welfare check and reported that I might harm myself. The officer was calm. He asked where I was and whether I needed medical help. Priya had warned us this might happen, so I gave my full name, said I was safe, and explained that I had voluntarily left a shared home after discovering an undisclosed recording device. I offered to meet officers at the station with my attorney the next morning. That answer changed the tone of the conversation. The officer said I was not required to return to Mason and noted that I had made direct contact. I spent the night at a hotel reserved by Priya's office instead of Hannah's house. I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me reach for my phone. At 6:15 a.m. the next morning, Denise texted Hannah. Mason had called the company's general number before the office opened. He left a voicemail saying he was Claire Bennett's domestic partner and needed to speak with Human Resources about an urgent mental health concern. He said I had become erratic after receiving a promotion. He mentioned changes in clothing, unusual behavior at home, sudden financial decisions, and conflict with family. He made my escape sound like the final stage of a workplace breakdown. Denise did exactly what we had discussed. She saved the voicemail, documented the time, and forwarded it to Human Resources and company counsel. She did not confirm whether I was working or where I was. By noon, Priya had helped me request a temporary protection order. She was careful not to promise it would be granted. We submitted the camera photographs, router records, rental application, incident file, Mason's messages, the police call, and the Human Resources voicemail. The judge issued a short temporary order pending a full hearing. It did not make me feel safe. It made me feel like we had placed a thin piece of paper between us and a man who had spent months preparing to explain why the paper should not exist. Mason did not contact me from his regular number again. Other numbers began calling. The first belonged to a prepaid phone. The second showed a local area code, but did not connect when I called it back. One message said, "Your mother deserves to know the truth." Another said, "You left property that belongs to both of us." A third said only, "High maintenance was funny. This isn't." Priya told me not to answer. I saved screenshots and sent them to her. Flowers arrived at my office with no name on the card. The message said, "Let someone take care of you for once." Denise photographed the box and had security remove it. A week later, Mason filed a complaint with our apartment manager claiming I had stolen household property and damaged the internet equipment. The manager emailed me because my name was still on the lease. The list of stolen property included my tool bag, my work laptop, and the pink workout set. The workout set had been in my gym bag when I left. I had forgotten about it. Mason valued it at $280. It had cost $49. That detail helped Priya more than I expected. It connected his property complaint to the same outfit described in his incident file. He had previously written that I threw the first set away. Now he was claiming the replacement was a valuable shared item. His stories worked best when no one compared them. We started comparing everything. Detective Aaron Cole met me at Priya's office regarding the hidden charger. He did not act shocked. He asked where it had been placed, who purchased it, who controlled the router, and whether I had ever agreed to be recorded in the bedroom. I had not. The charger was still in the apartment. Because Mason remained on the lease and the legal questions were complicated, Detective Cole did not promise an immediate search. He asked whether I could identify the seller or registration account from the device information. I searched the serial number in my email from a computer Mason had never used. There was no receipt. Then I remembered something small. When the apartment's smart thermostat stopped connecting 2 months earlier, Mason had asked me to forward him the support email because all our smart devices were under one account. I found the old message. The account page listed registered products: the thermostat, front door camera, smart lock, and one device identified as a compact indoor security unit. The serial number matched the charger. The account owner was Mason. I forwarded the records to Priya and Detective Cole. Later, through the proper request to the manufacturer, investigators confirmed when the device had been activated and which account received its alerts. The company could not recover every recording, but the account history showed repeated remote connections, while Mason claimed he was at work dinners. That explained how he knew when I came home. It explained how he heard Hannah. It did not explain the rest of his life. Trevor Mills did. I had known Trevor as Mason's younger half-brother for almost 2 years. He came to Thanksgiving once and helped us move apartments. He and Mason looked nothing alike, but families are complicated, and I never questioned it. Hannah found Trevor through an old photo Mason had tagged before he changed his social media privacy settings. The caption called Trevor his roommate, not his brother. Priya contacted him, not me. Trevor agreed to speak after he learned Mason had used his name in the rental paperwork. He said he and Mason had shared an apartment 5 years earlier. Mason began introducing him as a half-brother because, in Trevor's words, people trust a man with family around him. Trevor sometimes played along at parties because Mason paid him or covered old debts. By the time he realized Mason was using the relationship with women he dated, it had become easier to avoid him than explain it. He also told Priya that Mason had not been a regional director. After the Northline contract ended, he made money reselling software subscriptions, arranging short-term sales leads, and borrowing from people who thought his next commission was coming. The Chicago leadership trips were weekend poker tournaments. Then Trevor asked whether I had spoken to Leah. Lee Morgan was the former girlfriend Mason described as obsessive, jealous, and emotionally unstable. According to him, she had once vanished for 3 days to punish him and later tried to ruin his career. Trevor said Leah had not vanished. She had moved out. Priya reached her through an email address Trevor provided. Lee did not want to be involved in court, and I respected that. She did agree to send a short written statement. Mason had pressured her to leave a nursing program and move with him to Indiana. When she refused, he contacted her mother and said she was abusing prescription medication. Lee left after finding that Mason had logged into her student account and withdrawn an application for clinical placement. She had never reported it. She changed numbers and moved in with an aunt. Her statement did not prove what Mason did to me. Priya was clear about that. But it showed that the story Mason told about Leah had reversed the roles in almost the same way he was trying to reverse ours. I read Leah's statement once, then I put it away. I had spent 3 years believing Mason survived a relationship with a dangerous woman. That belief made me more patient every time he called me cold. I wanted to show him that I was safe, reasonable, and loyal. Leah had been used as a warning before I ever met her. The full hearing took place 3 weeks after I left. Mason arrived in a navy suit with an attorney. He looked rested. I had lost 9 pounds and was wearing a blazer borrowed from Hannah because none of mine fit correctly. That difference scared me. He looked like the stable person in the room. His position was simple. The charger was part of a home security system. Both residents knew the apartment used smart devices. He had never intended to record private activity. He said I became angry after my promotion, created a humiliating public performance, emptied shared accounts, stole property, and disappeared. He described the welfare check and human resources call as reasonable attempts to protect me. He even produced the incident file. For a moment, I could not believe it. The same document that frightened me was now being offered as proof that he had acted responsibly. Priya did not attack every sentence. She asked narrow questions. If the charger was ordinary home security, why was it disguised as a charger? Why was it pointed toward the bed rather than the front door? Why did Mason never tell me it contained a microphone? Why did his manufacturer account show remote connections during my private phone call? Mason said he checked the feed after receiving an alert. Priya asked what alert he received while I was folding towels and speaking to my sister. He said he could not remember. She moved to the rental application. Mason said it was only a draft for a future home we had discussed together. Priya asked why it listed my social security number and income, but described him as self-employed when he had repeatedly told me he worked for Northline. His attorney objected to part of the question. The judge allowed Priya to separate it. Mason said he had recently begun consulting. Priya showed the Northline contract end date. Then she showed messages from 6 months later in which Mason told me he had been promoted by the company. He said the term, promotion, had referred to a larger consulting role. Then Priya played the voicemail he left for my employer. Mason's voice filled the room. Calm, concerned, careful. He told Human Resources that my promotion had triggered a serious personality change. He asked whether I had made unusual financial decisions at work. He suggested the company restrict my access to sensitive accounts until I received help. That part had not been in the short summary Dennis sent me. He had not only tried to make my employer doubt my mental health, he had tried to make them remove me from the job that allowed me to leave. Denise testified that nothing in my performance suggested I was unstable or misusing company funds. She explained that I had voluntarily disclosed a personal safety issue and followed company procedure. Hannah testified about our phone call. She repeated the phrases Mason later quoted. She confirmed she had never shared them with him. Mason's attorney argued that none of this proved he sent the messages from the prepaid numbers. Priya agreed that the sender had not yet been established. She did not need every allegation to rest on the weakest evidence. She returned to the facts with names, dates, accounts, and recordings. Mason denied monitoring me until the device account showed that he had. He denied planning a move until the application showed my private information. He described the Human Resources call as concern, but the voicemail asked my employer to limit my authority. He called my tool bag shared property even though it had been a gift from my father years before we met. No single item explained everything. Together, they formed a pattern he could not smooth over. The judge extended the protection order. Mason was barred from contacting me directly or through other people and from approaching my home or workplace. The recording device remained part of a separate investigation, so the judge did not make broad statements about criminal guilt. It was not the dramatic ending people imagine. No one put Mason in handcuffs in the courtroom. He did not confess. He did not scream when he lost. He looked at me once while leaving. Then he smiled. For 2 months, that smile stayed with me more than any threat. The order did not repair my finances. It did not make my mother forget the recording. It did not stop me from checking every outlet in every room I entered. But it gave us a line. Each time Mason tested it, there was a record. The prepaid messages stopped after Detective Cole obtained records showing that one of the numbers had been funded through a digital wallet registered to Mason. Flowers stopped arriving. The apartment manager allowed me to end my part of the lease after receiving the order and documentation from Priya. Mason sent one final message through a mutual friend, saying he forgave me. Priya documented it as third-party contact. I did not respond. Recovery was less satisfying than escape. It happened in small, boring pieces. I rented a one-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from work. The first week, I slept at Hannah's place because I could not stand being alone with electrical outlets. The second week, I slept in my own living room with every light on. By the third week, I made it through a night in the bedroom. I bought my own router and asked a technician to show me the device list. I created the administrator password myself. When he offered to set up remote support, I said no. At work, Denise gave me the option to step back from management temporarily. I almost accepted because I worried everyone now saw me as fragile. Then I realized that was exactly what Mason had tried to create. I kept the position. I made mistakes. I asked too many questions in meetings. I checked the parking lot from Denise's window. Once, a delivery driver left flowers at reception for someone else, and I had to lock myself in a bathroom until I could breathe normally. None of that meant Mason had been right about me. It meant something had happened to me. There was a difference. My mother apologized for doubting me. I told her why the recording had sounded real. We listened to the full version together, including the part about my father's hospital visit. She cried again, but this time she was angry at him. Hannah never said she had warned me. She did, however, make a rule that any future boyfriend claiming to be an executive had to produce either a tax return or a name tag. I laughed harder than the joke deserved. The pink workout set stayed in a box for almost 6 months. I could not decide whether it felt like evidence, a costume, or just clothing. One Saturday, I put it on and went for a run. No makeup, no hoop earrings, no audience Mason had selected. The top was still loud. The words high maintenance still stretched across the front. Halfway through the run, an older woman walking a golden retriever gave me a thumbs up. I kept running. Later that spring, the kitchen faucet in my new apartment began leaking. I took my tool bag from the closet and replaced the washer. Hannah was visiting, and she watched from the doorway. Need help? She asked. It was a normal question. That was why I liked it. If I do, I'll tell you. She nodded and went back to making coffee. I still wear dresses sometimes. I still wear jeans most days. I ask for help when I want it, and I open my own doors when my hands are free. None of those choices prove anything about what kind of woman I am. They are only choices. That was all Mason had ever wanted to take from me.